Hello and welcome to my studio here in France. I'm working on a mural at the moment which is a reproduction of the famous Michelangelo creation of Adam from the Sistine Chapel. While I'm doing it, I thought it'd be quite interesting to do some videos about drawing and about drawing the human face, the head, hands and the figure as a whole, using Michelangelo's figures, or some of them anyway, from the Sistine Chapel as inspiration, because he's a great person to look at if you want to improve your drawing. His poses are always very dramatic, the expressions are very dramatic, and as I say, it's a great place to start. So if you want to improve your drawing or learn a bit more about drawing, or if you're a beginner and want to have a go, watch and follow me through these drawings. The first one we're going to do is a side-on portrait of God. Yep, that bloke. And we're going to do a close-up of this figure in pencil. So all you need to do this is ideally an A3 pad and some pencils. The B pencils are best. I tend to use 2B, 3B, 4B. They're great. You don't need a huge stack of stuff, you just need a pad and some pencils to get going. A3 is better than A4 because you've got a bit more space to be more gestural with your mark making. So yeah, get a pad, get some pencils and let's go. Before we start, I just want to say something about how we hold our pencil. Now, when drawing, we hold our pencil differently from when writing. So when you're writing, you would hold your pencil usually like this, and rest your hand on the side and write like this. Now, if you see my hand, it has a minimal amount of movement. Very controlled, but the only movement is in the fingers and the thumb. Now if I take away that place on which we lean on the page, then suddenly I've got a whole load more freedom. So my suggestion is that you don't rest your hand on the page all the time. You want to now and again just for where you're doing detail, but actually hold your hand well off the page, and it allows you, a bit like a musketeer, to move much more freely within your drawing. And the other suggestion I would have is to pull your hand way down your pencil. I quite like these half-size pencils because you can hold them off the end like this and draw a bit like a paintbrush. So you're drawing a little bit more fluidly like this. Another grip you can have is to hold what's called a paintbrush grip, which is like this, and you have the paper here, and effectively you're drawing like this, so you can see the end of your pencil very clearly and your hand is underneath. It's a good grip for looking and being able to see the marks you're making with the pencil, but it's a very limited grip in terms of movement. There's not as much movement there as there is with this grip. I find this is the most fluid grip. So have a go at holding the pencil differently and see what happens to your drawing. The first thing we need to think about is this, the skull. Obviously when we're drawing the human figure, inside us all is a skeleton, and it's like that's the bones literally on which the rest of us is hung, our internal structure if you like. And so it's good to have an understanding of the skull when you're drawing. And the skull is made up of this, egg-shaped piece here, which is the main part of it, and then hanging off the front is the jawbone, with obviously just the hint of the bridge of the nose there. Now if you're drawing a figure, the first thing to think about is the skull? At what angle are these fundamental parts, i.e. this big kind of round shape and the jaw coming off the bottom side, where are they? And in the figure of God here, I think he's about that angle, so he's looking down. And what's interesting about this position is, I've got to do a bit more work on this by the way, but this angle, the nose and the forehead are really leaning forward. So if we want to draw the figure, this God, representation of God at the same angle, then our skull is really tipped forward like this. So we can start our drawing thinking about this shape and this dropped jaw here. So here goes the first sketch, which I'm giving myself 10 minutes to do. I've speeded the film up to double speed, so the drawing will appear here in 5 minutes. The first thing I'm doing is sketching out the basic position of the details. I have a small reproduction of God's head from from the creation of Adam, and that's in a book resting just above my sketch pad, out of shot. The image is probably 3 inches by 4 inches, something like that, and so I'm scaling up the drawing. As we're changing the size of the drawing, we've got to think about the distances, the relative distances between the elements within the drawing. So how far is the distance between the end of the nose and the eye? How wide is that nostril? At what angle is that nose pointing down? Where is the edge of that beard and how does it relate across to the ear? At what distance is there between the ear and the eye, between the eye and the eyebrow? At what angle does the forehead go up, away and meet the hairline? All these considerations are a constant thought process. With every mark we place down on the paper, we have another reference point from which we can take an estimated guess, a distance estimated guess to the next mark, the next feature or the next shadow or the next edge in the drawing. And each of these things, as they build up, create the image as a whole. So it's good to concentrate on this idea of not trying really hard to draw this drawing, but to actually make marks and respond to the image as it appears. You're looking at the reference and drawing from the reference, but you're also looking at your own drawing and seeing how it is evolving and being prepared to make little adjustments as it goes, as the process happens. Bear in mind this is a 10-minute sketch, so we're trying to give an impression in a short amount of time. It's a practice run, if you like, as to where things are, what's going right, what's going wrong, what do I need to think about if I'm drawing this image of God. There's very little skull shape to see here, it's covered in hair, but we need to be very conscious of where that skull is in terms of being able to get a convincing idea of the hair growing from the head. Everything has got to relate to each other and therefore be more believable. If something's particularly out of place in a realistic drawing, you notice it straight away. It doesn't have to be far out of place for things to look really odd. Now this is not trying to reproduce this in a perfect, accurate, forgery type of drawing. This is an impression of this image. This is a dry run, if you like, a warm-up sketch to get a feel of the image, to make some marks, to see where the dynamics are of the image, and to see what angle that face is at, that essential kind of stare that's really important. And here I'm just finishing up the sketch by darkening that area behind the face. Now what that does is that brings the light onto the face and brings the face forward, gives it a little bit more idea of three-dimensionality, if that's a word, and makes it a little bit more convincing. So we're coming up to the end. We're missing a few details. We've got a few details. We've got the focus on the stare, on the eyes. We've got a bit of drama going on in terms of this idea of the hair being very windswept. And yeah, I think that's kind of come together. I've learned a bit from doing it, and we can now think about moving on to a longer drawing. So a last few scribbles just to put a tiny little bit of information in that beard, and then I think we're about done for this sketch. So now we've done the first sketch, and whether that was successful or a disaster or average or whatever, we've got something on which we can improve, in which we can move forward. So bearing in mind what you learned from that first sketch, look at it, analyse it, and ask yourself, if you did it again, where you would improve and what you could do to improve. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to start a second sketch, and we're going to give ourselves a longer time period to do it. This one I've given myself about an hour to do, something like that. And so the first, half an hour is going to be really mapping it out and making sure that I'm comfortable that everything's in the right position. So no pressure on the pencil, no significant pressure. You'll see the marks as they appear, and you'll get a clear idea of the drawing evolving, but save pressure for the second half of the drawing. That's where you can really deliver the definition, the true kind of light values, and really pull the drawing together. Now bear in mind, this is a 1 hour drawing, this is not an 8 hour drawing, so we will still have elements that are loose, we will still have loose lines and scribbles and things, but that's what gives a drawing character. If you want to do a super accurate, photographically perfect reproduction of something, it's doable. You just take a lot longer to do it. But really, I can't see the point. You may as well just have the photo. This is about our drawing, it's our marks, it's finding our own expression through looking at another piece of art and reproducing it. So we find our personal use of the pencil, our personal marks, our personal gestures. So here we go, a fresh piece of paper, and as you can see, I'm mapping out the skull shape first. You have that curve over the top, and then the jaw dropping down at an angle from that, and there's the eye socket. So you can just about make out that skull shape there. That gives me the angle of the head. So you won't see it at the end of the drawing. In fact, you can't see it in the original because God is, of course, covered in lots of hair. Medieval versions of God are always very hairy. In fact, just about throughout history, God's always had a fantastic beard. Do like a big beard. Big beards are so characterful and look fantastic. Mainly on men, I have to say. I'm less keen on women with gigantic beards, I'm not sure it does quite the same thing for a woman. Anyway, there you go, each to their own. So I've mapped out the skull, and that's allowed me to plot in the features of the eye and the nose and the mouth, although the mouth is also covered in hair. So I'm having to kind of draw what I see. There are areas on this where it's slightly difficult to make out exactly where things are, because the original is quite dark in areas, and I'm working from a small reproduction of it in my book on the Sistine Chapel. You can still see the eye socket there in the skull shape, and you can see that I'm just making the edges of where some of those shadow lines will be. But I'm still putting no real pressure on. I'm building pressure ever so slightly to try and get a bit of definition, but I'm really not pressing down this pencil very hard at all. I was working with a 2B pencil, I think throughout this drawing, certainly for the first half of this drawing. This is a 2B pencil, and that's all you need really. You've got so much flexibility in the pressure. And you can see those lightest lines, they are really mapping lines. They may not even be visible by the end of the drawing. But you don't need an eraser if you're not pressing hard. Don't press hard. There's no reason to press at all. Just repeatedly go over the lines, and that way you'll make ever such slightly gentle adjustments to the lines. And again, if you see my hand, particularly when I'm doing these curves of the beard, I'm making my hand do these circular marks, and then when I feel the hand is moving comfortably, then I allow the pencil to touch the paper and make the mark. So the more fluid, the more our hands holding the pencil can sort of dance across the image we're drawing, the better, and the more flowing those curves will be. His beard is a little bit more complicated than I actually wanted it to be, but anyway, that's okay. He's allowed. He's God, and he's flying through the sky at the moment of creation, delivering Adam to the world, creating Adam, which is quite a feat if you believe in all that stuff. Yeah, that's up to you. We won't go there. But anyway, it's a great image, and it's lovely to draw these kind of curving shapes. Now you can stylize these as much or as little as you want. They are flowing lines suggesting the hair being blown around in this wind, which obviously it was quite windy in at the moment at which God was doing this stuff and creating the world and everything in it. Yeah, I expect it would be quite windy because there was a lot going on. So I'm comfortable that I've got everything kind of in the right place. When I looked at this later, I'm not sure I got the shoulder in the right place. I think I had him coming off the wrong part of his beard, that far shoulder. But I'm not going to worry about it. Like I said, it's not about 100% accuracy to the original. This is about learning about drawing, about finding lines and shapes. It's about letting your hand move freely. Now I've stopped it there just to show you the kind of halfway stage. Now, as you can see, I'm going to start to press some of these lines in. Now, if I was taking several hours over this drawing, then these darker areas would build more slowly. But as I said, this is a 1 hour sketch, and so once everything was mapped in, I wanted to get the definition in fairly quickly. So hence I'm kind of jumping in that pressure thing and putting in these lines, these tonal areas with more pressure and definition. I'm still using the 2B pencil. I haven't gone up to a 3B, 4B, 5B. To be honest, once you get up through beyond 3B, things can quite quickly smudge if your hand is on the paper at any point. I find up to 2B you get far less smudging even if your hand is on the page, but still with pressure you can get a good dark line. So yeah, my personal preference is a 2B for this kind of drawing. As you can see, with darkening in the lines, we start getting a much more definition. We can start getting those difference in value between the lines that are best kept very light and the lines or the areas where we want to press the pencil down and get a darker value to what we're putting on the paper. So I'm not tracing the lines here. I'm still looking at the drawing, or the painting rather, the reproduction from the original, which is in the book above me. And as I go round the drawing now, because I've mapped in all the basics, as I go back in now, I can look for those much smaller details, those ever such slight tonal variations, little adjustments to where the edge of the eyebrow comes down just above the eye, the shadows around the eye, the very, very light shadow down the nose there, and there's shadow there in the temple on the forehead. And by building these up slowly, these tonal values around the features, I can build them up together, and then I'm not overworking one particular feature too early and without it being in relation to another area. So I've worked the whole front of the face together so that that whole face is being delivered with kind of equal values. There's not a break in my concentration, and I'm matching pencil pressures as I go round the features. Now there's a lot more pressure to put in round the ear and the shadow there that's on the cheek, but I don't want to put that shadow in until I'm much more comfortable about the details, the information around it. So I'm working on his ear just to be clear that that's in the right place and that I'm happy with it before I start going back in and putting those shadows in. Now, little word about cross-hatching or shading. I'm not really a fan of shading, particularly if it's kind of cross-hatching just for the sake of getting a tone. Every time we press our pencil down and make a mark on the paper, we want it to be a descriptive mark. So even when we're cross-hatching, it's really important that the angle that we're cross-hatching, the lines we're placing on the paper to create the darker area or build up the tone, are going in a descriptive direction, so they can help describe the surface area. If we just cross-hatch in a less thoughtful manner and we're just building the tone for the sake of building the tone, then the drawing itself will flatten and it will become less interesting. So be very careful when cross-hatching, when shading, when building tone. Try and keep the marks in the direction of what you want to describe. Are you going in line with the thing you're describing, or are you going across it? And if you're going across it, are you going across it for the right reasons? I.e., when you're building up these shadows on the skin that I'm working on, each of those has a very slightly different angle of shading to the next one, because there are subtle movements within the side of his face, the way the light is catching it, and each of those areas of shadow is just different from another little area, and so to change the angle direction of the pencil mark will help deliver a little bit more detail in those areas, a little bit more variation, and make the light feel like it's moving a little bit more than if you just do it from one direction. These tonal areas on the side of his face, they're quite dark in this reproduction that I have. I don't know, it's hard to say, because every photo you get of a piece of artwork, be it a mural or a painting or whatever, is going to be slightly different because of the lighting conditions the photograph was taken in. So I've seen all sorts of different kind of qualities to the colour in Michelangelo's work, his work in the Sistine Chapel, because all the photographs have very different colours in them. So I guess that's just an exposure thing and a time of day the photograph was taken and everything else. But as I said at the start, we're not fussed. It's not so important that this is kind of a perfect reproduction of every detail. We're not going to go and see the Pope and say, hey, would you like to buy this? And anyway, he would likely say, no, I've already got one. So really remember, this is for us, this is for you. You're drawing for the sake of drawing, for the sake of meditation, for the sake of enjoying the process, and just seeing, improving your skill and enjoying the process. It's a pleasure to sit down and be still for a while and lose yourself in something. The world is a mad place. There's all sorts of stuff going on in it, and has been ever since the dawn of time. So it's quite nice to lose yourself in something and not worry about the world for 5 minutes or an hour, as in the case of this drawing here. So nice little curls there on the bottom of his beard, and as I say, there was a lot more beard on this than perhaps you will find regularly on modern men. I know beards in the UK have become a lot more trendy and a lot more popular, but few people have beards as good as this one. But then again, this is God. He's allowed to have the best beard. In fact, being God, I think he should have the best beard. So good for him. Nice beard, well done. So I'm building up these curves and putting a little bit of tone in these curves. Now, as I get further away from the face, I'm worrying less and less about the accuracy. And that is partly because my hour is beginning to run a little out, but it's also because when we look at a drawing of a face, our eyes will be drawn to the eyes, the nose, the face itself. So the information on the perimeter of the drawing is less important. When we look at anything in life, we're focusing on the thing we're looking at, and everything around that is in our peripheral vision. So when you see drawings or paintings where the artist has drawn or painted absolutely everything in perfect focus, they don't look quite right. And that's because we don't see things like that in the real world. In the real world, we're only focusing on one particular bit at a time. And as I say, with this drawing, this side-on portrait of God, we are really focusing on the strength of that face, the eyes, and the angle he is at. And again, just like on the sketch, I've darkened that area behind his face in order to bring the light out on that face, bring the light forward. Just coming to the end of the sketch there now, I'm quite happy with that. I mean, that's a nice hour spent. I've got the face looking convincing, and I've got the fluidity around it. There's the original again. There's my 1 hour sketch, and thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.